Okay, so now let's take a look at each of the individual screen components to see what's different there. So actually, let's start with this one right here, the next page component. And that's the second page, the component that represents this second screen right here. So when you look at it, it's very simple. Now you have a little bit of an ivory colored background, so you got some styling going on. And then you have a text in the middle that says second page. So you probably have some styling of that text and some styling to center it. Okay, but pretty simple otherwise. So when we take a look at that code here, so here it is. Here's our nextpage.js file. It's pretty much the same as a standard component. You have your imports at the top. So here's your imports. You got your main body in the middle. There it is. And then you have your styling section near the end. Okay, so there it is. Now, in this case, there's nothing that's really different about this. There's no special additional code that we need to include here, okay, because there's no buttons or links from this page that take you to other pages. It's just kind of has its content and that's it. There's no navigation to anywhere else. So for this page here, the second page, there's no special code that needs to be added. It looks pretty much like a standard component page. Okay, now let's go back to the first page. Okay, so the home page right here. Let's take a look at that because that one is going to have some special stuff because we have an element, a component, this button, this blue button here, that blue button that when I press it takes me somewhere else. So there are some navigation functions that go on that home page. I need to have some code that's going to take care of navigating from the first page to the second page. Okay, when I press that button. So there's got to be some code there. Now, by the way, if you're wondering, well, what about this guy at the top here? You said the second page didn't have anything special, but you got this navigator back here, this back button. How does that work? Okay, well, that navigation there is taken care of by, if we go back to our main app file, it's taking care of that stack navigator. Okay, remember we had those special two components, the navigation container and the stack navigator. Those two components are the ones that take care of stuff like that like back button right there. So we don't need to have any specific code on the page component itself to take care of that. That's already taken care of in the main app by the stack navigator. Okay, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so let's take a look at our home.js. Home.js is the file that contains the component for the first page. And this one's got to have some specific navigation code in it because we have a button that takes us specifically to a different page. Okay, so what do we need to include for this one? Okay, well, for the button, if you look at the imports at the top, let's start there. Pretty standard, you have import React from React. And then you have import and then the standard core components. We got a view, we got a text, we got a button, we got a style sheet, and we have an image. Okay, and some of those actually don't use. I put an image there thinking I might put an image on the screen, but actually didn't turn out to use it, so I could take that out. Okay, but we do need things like the view, the text, and the button, and the style sheet because we're doing some styling. Okay, so pretty standard imports, nothing new there. Okay, now when you look at the bottom, there's our style, so nothing new in the styles either. When you do navigation, or in fact many special things, you don't really need to do anything different on the style. So there's pretty much standard styles. You have a container style, which does the centering and does the background color for the screen, this kind of ivory color. And then you have a welcome text style, which takes care of like the boldface and the font size for the text. Okay, so nothing different in the style section either. Okay, what's going to be different is in the main body right there. Okay, so a couple of things. So first, in the function declaration, line 9, where we set up the name of the function, the component function, which is called home. And remember, that has to be the same as the name of the file, home.js. So the function inside of it that makes that component is also called home. Okay, now in the past, we've had that just empty set of parentheses after, but now we've got something inside that parentheses. We have a curly brace, and then inside of that we have navigation. Okay, so what is that? Well, that's called a parameter. For the case of a function, The stuff inside the parentheses are called parameters, and those are extra bits of information or data that you give the function, or you say pass into it, to allow it to customize itself or to do some extra things. Now, in the past, our components have been simple enough that we haven't had to write functions that take in parameters. They've been simple enough that they just do their job self-contained and no extra information is needed. But now we're getting more sophisticated. So now we're going to need to pass in some components to our functions. And so whenever you have something that has some kind of navigation element on it, something that when you click it or press it is going to take you to a different screen, then we need to include this navigation parameter. Okay, so see how it's set up. You have a curly brace. So inside the parentheses, you got a curly brace, and then you have navigation inside of it. Okay, so that's a new thing there. Okay, now the other new thing is, let's take a look at the button. Okay, so the button is line 13. That's this. So it's a self-closing tag. You don't need an opening and a closing. You just need one of them. With the self-closing, the slash end angle bracket at the end. So let's look inside of it. So what's inside of it? So we got these extra little things in addition to the name of the component itself, button. We got those extra things inside of it. Okay, those are called attributes sometimes. You notice those are similar to, in HTML, we sometimes had attributes. Like when we had the A tag in HTML, the link tag. You needed something if you wanted to link to an outside website. You needed a SRC, a source. Or when we had the IMG tag, the image, you needed to have an attribute inside of it to tell it where the file was. Okay, so similar to that, the button component has some attributes. So first it's got a title, and that's called second screen. Okay, so what is that? Well, you can kind of see from context, that is the text that's on the blue button. So see, the text on the blue button says second screen. Okay, and that's what the title is. So the title must be what text is going to appear on the button. Okay, and then you got this next thing here, on press equals, and then you got a curly brace, and then inside of that you got function, parentheses, another curly brace, navigation dot navigate next screen. Okay, so what's all that about? Okay, well, what that is it's a special attribute for buttons, and you can kind of tell by the context, on press. Well, that must be what happens when you press the button or click the button. So when you press the button, on a press of the button, then this code inside of it's going to happen. Okay, what is it? Well, it's a function, so it does some job, small piece of code that does some job. What's the heart of the function? Well, you have navigation, navigate. Okay, so that must tell the app to go to somewhere else, navigate to somewhere else. Well, where does it know to navigate to? Well, inside of navigate, you have next screen. Okay, well, I wonder where that is from. Okay, well, if you go back, let's go back to our main app.js file. Okay, remember our stack screen. Okay, those were the different screens of our app. And the second screen had a name attribute attached to it. And notice how that name is next screen. Okay, right there. And so that next screen, that name of that screen, must link up with this next screen on our on press function in our button component. Okay, so it all kind of links up. Okay, so that's how it knows. It knows because of the name of that screen that we gave it in the main app, it knows, okay, that's where we must need to go. Okay, so that takes us to our next screen. Okay, so that button, so whenever you have a component that takes care of navigation, like a button, okay, or a link or something like that, then you've got to set up those extra attributes inside of it to give it the information it needs to do its job. And in the case of a navigator, that's how it looks. Okay, so two new things inside the main function. You pass in the navigation parameter, so that's to allow it to access all the functions of the navigator. And then in the button, or in this case, the button, or in whatever element that is going to take you to another screen, then you've got to set up some code like this. In case of a button, it's an on-press function. That's kind of a standard built-in attribute that gives you code that tells it how to get to the next page. And it gets to the next page by using the navigation that you passed in as a parameter. Okay, so all that seems fairly behind the scenes, fairly obtuse, but it's actually pretty tight and pretty straightforward. Okay, so that's how you do the navigation. Okay, so I've given you a link to this code. So what I would suggest is you open up this code, you copy it to your file space, you make a copy for yourself, and then you just start kind of looking at it and playing around with it. A lot of times with code, if you just kind of look for things that you recognize, like, oh, okay, I recognize there's a button thing, and then inside of it, there's enough context usually in, even though you may not know, okay, exactly what's going on here, there's enough context and things are named suggestively enough that you can often piece together, just by kind of using clues and context, you can often piece together kind of what's going on and what things you need to modify. If you want to implement something similar in your app, what things you need to take over and tweak to get it to work in your context. Okay, so that's navigation, and that'll open up a whole new vista of things that you can do with your own app.